Just to relate it to what's going on today in the world, speaking about, people are testifying before Congress about the anti-Semitism that's literally increasing multiples from day to day throughout the United States, college campuses. And we're not only talking about Muslims, even American college students, they've taken up this course. And it's not just a dislike. It's manifesting itself even in terms of Jews are fearful to be in the proximity of these people, because when they're in a group, person could actually be compromised very seriously. What's activating all this? What's the cause of all this? We had an event. It took place about 3,500 years ago. It's called the Sinai event. It was clear to the world then that God was the creator and is the creator. And he came and he made an offer to all the nations of the world. And he says, I want to offer you my credo that you should accept it, my prescription of life. And I want to have a relationship with you. So every nation said to God, not a problem. Just tell us what it's about. And God told the Edomites, it says in my 10 commandments, thou shalt not commit murder. And the Edomites said to God that we can't accept, because we have a blessing from our forefather, Isaac, that he gave a blessing to Esau, who's the founding father of the Edomite kingdom. You shall live by your sword. And if we live by a sword, it's something impossible to observe. Therefore, thank you, but no thank you. And one after another, they asked the same question. Hashem responded, and they said, no, thank you. We're not interested. We as Jews, the descendants of Avraham and Yaakov, when we were offered the Torah, we said, Nasa v'nishma. We accept unequivocally. We didn't even ask what it's about. God, if you're offering it, we're grabbing it. We're taking it. Now, when God said to them, you should accept my credo, my prescription of life, he didn't say, and you will be the chosen of all the nations of the world. He didn't say that. That's only a result of accepting the Torah. When we accepted, God says, now, because you've accepted it, I've chosen you from all the nations of the world. You are my people. I am your God. You are my people. You are a holy nation. You're a kingly, princely nation. That was a result of accepting. Now, if they understand that God is the creator, offered to them, why did they turn it down? As much as it doesn't fit into their their idea of what life's about. But if the creator is offering it to you, how do you turn it down? Well, they understood, evidently, if he's offering it, he's leaving it up to us, we have a choice. And they did have a choice. And they chose to reject it, to turn it down. After they turned it down, they now have a different level of representation of this existence. The Jewish people have one level of representation of this existence, and they have another representation of this existence. The Jewish people, we represent God's presence in this world. The world, they represent something other than that. They represent the finite. They represent what we call God's non-existence. God does not dictate existence. They believe, they actually dictate their destiny. To a degree, they do. Because if the Jew fails, God says, you people, you dictate your destiny. But if the Jews succeed, then you're going to be subject to whatever the Jews are subject to, in a positive sense. So what happened then? It started really with Esav and Yaakov. There was a struggle, and the struggle started in utero between good and evil, and they fought. And Esav initially wanted to destroy Yaakov, which we read about in next week's reading, because he took the birthright. What is the birthright? The birthright is the designation of Yaakov to be the primary player in existence. Esav says he's the primary player in existence. It's a struggle between good and evil. Is the essence of existence spirituality and the materials to facilitate that? Or the essence is the physicality, and a person could actually deny God? That's anti-Semitism. It has nothing to do with them understanding what the Jew is, because logically, it doesn't make any sense. There are 15 million Jews in this world. We're talking about the 8 billion people. Why should 8 billion people be threatened or have an issue with 15 million people? We're less than a speck on the spectrum. Nothing. But yet the whole world, since the founding of the State of Israel, a narrow strip of land, smaller than Rhode Island. That's what they used to say. The whole world is up in arms. And after it happened, always the focus is that Hitler, Yamach Shmo v'Zichro, his name should be obliterated and cursed forever with all the Nazis. He wanted to bring about the final solution. Versus the world, how many Jews are there? But he understood it's not number-wise, it's not quantity, it's what we are, what we represent. We represent something which he cannot tolerate, because he understands that if we exist, he's threatened. Our mere existence threatens his existence. Because Hitler was Amalek. The Amalekites wanted to destroy the Jewish people, going back to the time of what? Of the splitting of the sea. Afterwards, we were attacked. And God says, my throne is not complete till they're obliterated. Nothing has changed in all these thousands of years. That same struggle, they wanting to obliterate and to annihilate the Jewish people, that there should be no representation of Jews in this world. Nothing has changed. And now more than ever, all the world powers, whether it's the United States, whether it's China, whether it's Iran, whether it's Korea, whatever it is, whether it's Russia, everybody has a hand in the Middle East. So I don't say why, when, where. It's a struggle of the superpowers. But it's interesting. It's a struggle of the superpowers, but the Jews are caught in between here. We're the ones on the ground, so to say. The evil inclination, when he tries to discourage us or to convince us, when we want to do certain things, he tries to explain it's not the right thing to do. Why is he trying to do that? What is that objective? What is he a representation of? Exactly what the nations of the world represent. If we make the right decision, we're empowering our spirituality. If we choose to do the wrong thing, we're weakening our spiritual base. We're weakening it. And then we become vulnerable to whatever the world is all about. And they're able to destroy us. So we're talking about Chesed. Chesed. So he explains it with an allegory. If you have well-weathered businessmen and they advise you to do a certain type of transaction, and these people are without a question, their acumen and their track record is impeccable. Nobody's ever lost money with them. And they advise you to get involved in a certain transaction. And you have the means that you could get involved. And people here, are you out of your mind? How do you put that kind of money into this kind of investment? So you say, do you know who advised me? It's not just an ordinary person advised me. These are the ultimate experts that nobody's ever lost a dime with them. They've always made tremendous profits. So personally, that makes sense. We'd also like to invest. Okay. Now, there's no greater expert in return of investment than God himself. God said to the Jewish people, there's a positive commandment. When a poor man comes to you and asks you for a loan, there's a positive commandment you must lend him. If you have the ability to lend and he has the ability to pay, and he gives you collateral, he'll give you a guarantor, whatever it is, you have an obligation to lend him. Although you're bothered. Everyday person calls a stockbroker, or calls his accountant, or calls his legal advisor. Continuous. But the reason why you're calling is because you want to evaluate your financial worth. You don't feel you put upon, do you? Or your financial advisor keeps calling you with a new investment continuously and keeps you up to date. Do you feel burdened? Do you feel distracted? Definitely not. So here, God himself says, you want to make great profits? This is the way to do it. A poor man comes, he needs charity, and you have the ability, you should help him. He's not asking for charity, he just wants a favor, a loan. And he'll give you whatever you need, that you're not just giving away your money. You should do it. But it's a burden, it's bothersome, it's a distraction. God says, but that's what life's all about. If you want to succeed, that's the way you do it. Now, who echoes those words? King Solomon was the greatest, the wisest man who ever lived. He's a person who ruled the world supreme. And he says, you want to succeed in life, pursue Chesed and tzedakah. Pursue it. Unrelentlessly, just keep going after it. Because that's what success is all about. Could you disagree with Solomon? The wisest man who ever lived. And he's only mouthing what God said. And he's no fool. He understands what it's about. In the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, Amidah, we say, Uv'chein tein kavod la'amecha. We ask Hashem, give honor, bring glory to your people. Praise to those who fear you. We ask him, give honor to your people. Is that what we're looking for? Are we looking to be honored? But we ask it. Take out your Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur Machzor, whether it's transliterated or whatever you want to call it. What are we asking for honor and glory? Meaning, nobody's been through the difficulties of life as the Jewish people. Nobody suffered throughout history as the Jewish people. We gave our lives for God. Whether it was the Crusades, whether it was pogroms, whether it was forced conversions, and the Jew was willing to die. The world says it doesn't make any sense. Disraeli was the Prime Minister of England under the Queen of England. Do you know he converted to Christianity to have that position? He could not be the Prime Minister or whatever his position was unless he converted. The famous Nasana Tokef that we say on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur was written by a person by the name of Rav Klonimus. What was the story of Rav Klonimus? He lived in Germany. He was a time of the early commentators, and he was advisor to one of the Bavarian kings that had vassal states there. And the king valued him, his advice, and he was the confidant of the king. And he was a Jew, a devout Jew. And the ministers of this king were very jealous, anti-Semitic. And they said to the king, you know, the protocols to be part of the king's inner circle, you have to be a Christian. So why are you making an exception for this Rabbi Clonimus? You should tell him, if he really reveres you and respects you, is dedicated to you as a subject, he should give up his religion and convert to Christianity. And they convinced the king. That's the only way this advisor, his inner, being the most important person in the cabinet, could retain that position. He has to convert to Christianity. So the king calls in this Rabbi Clonimus and he says, you know, if you want to continue being my personal advisor and having the power you have to give up your religion, convert to Christianity. So he said to him, give me 3 days to think about it. That's what he said to the king. After he said that, within 5 minutes, he says, I regret what I said. He realized he made a mistake. He should have said immediately, under no circumstance. So the king says, if you don't convert, you'll be put to death and tortured to death. Because it's an affront to me if you don't convert. So Rabbi Clonimus, what did they do to him? They tortured him. They amputated his hands and feet. They gouged out his eyes. And they left him to die. And they called the Jewish community to take him and dispose of him. It was Rosh Hashanah. And they carried him in on a stretcher. And he said this Nasana Tokef. He spoke about what the day of judgment is. And how the angels in heaven tremble. And God determines who will live, who will die. And how will a person die, God forbid. We say this by sword, by fire, by drowning, by plague. Who will be wealthy, who will be poor. Everything's decided. Those words were the words of Rabbi Clonimus when they brought him into the synagogue, and then he died. Meaning, regardless of whatever they do to him, he's not relinquishing his belief. He's not giving it up. And he regretted for even hesitating and giving the king the impression he will consider it. It's never a consideration. This is the way Jews have died for God throughout the ages. People say, it doesn't make sense. You could have all the glory in the world. You're from the inner cabinet of the king. You're this prime minister of England, under the queen, this and that. And Jews, they say, no, we'll go to the guillotine, we'll go to the gas chamber, we'll go to who knows where. Not that. We will not turn our backs on God. So what does the world say? Doesn't make any sense. These Jews, they're out of their minds. They could have everything, what everybody vies for, and they give it up. And what do they give it up for? They have to forfeit their lives. Convert and just disappear, become anonymous. But Jews don't do that. And the world looks at the Jews as if they're unstable. They're unstable people. They're not rational. So we ask Hashem, all the years that we've given our lives to sanctify your name, reveal to the world what that's really all about. That whatever we gave, whatever we sacrificed, was worthwhile, everything we've ever done. So by giving honor to your people, the world will understand this is not insanity, but rather what we've done is the ultimate. Because if God says this is what you do, that's what you're supposed to do. And you know who reiterates it, who confirms it? King Solomon says, pursue kindness. Let kindness pursue you. Unrelentingly be involved in it. You mean I should always be worried about the other person, not about myself? Is that what God wants? God says, but that's the way we make profits. If you keep putting money into blue chip stocks, what do you get? You have enormous profits, guaranteed not to fail. You may fail in the financial, but in terms of the investment will have its return. And then they say, if you have enough patience when you invest in the stock market, ultimately you're not going to lose. You have to have patience. It may not pay you off in 50 years. You may not see the profits, the return on your investment. It may not pay off in 70 years. But after a person passes away, where the Jew believes his life is eternal, it's going to pay off plenty. It pays off to a degree that this world doesn't have the capacity even to compensate you for the most minute commandment, positive mitzvah. That's what it's about. So Avraham Avinu is the pillar of kindness. The man who took on the world single-handedly. He tells you. Integrity and kindness. King Solomon tells you the same thing. Could you have two better advisors who advise you how to invest your life physically and financially? That's what they're doing. But yet, we have a little bit whisperings in the ears, and we're blindsided by it. We get distracted. See, today it's very difficult to say what would you give for what for certain things. And one time, to have an audience with an emperor, you know what kind of honor that was, or the value of that was. Because when you have an audience with an emperor, he can give you anything you need or want. There's nothing he can't give you. And a Jew, 3 times a day, we have an audience with God. God listens attentively to what we say to him, as long as you meet certain criteria. When you stand before him with humility and you recognize who he is, you could ask God for anything. Who has that kind of opportunity? When we speak about the political scene, unfortunately, it's nothing you want to look at. There's no such thing as a statesman any longer. There's no such thing as honesty and integrity any longer. Everything is corrupt. But Lahavdil Elef Avdol is God. His level of impeccability, of anything which cannot be described, hasn't changed. God is immutable, is eternal. And you have the privilege to speak to him and have an audience with him. Do we value it? Rabbi, I have a meeting. Today I got to skip. I got to skip the mincha today. Because I have an important meeting. You know what that means? It's coming close. We got to close the deal, and it's sundown Friday afternoon. This deal is the deal of my life. I can't pass on it. But God's waiting for you. God enters into existence every Saturday, every 7th day of the week. You're going to hold up God for that deal you're doing. It's the ultimate level of disgrace. But again, everybody sees it the way he wants to see it. It's choice. You have to have perspective and you have to have clarity. And if you don't internalize and understand what it is, as they say, when push comes to shove, unfortunately, the material has the upper hand. But if you understand the material as much as we enjoy the material, but if you understand the value of the material is not ultimately an end unto itself, then you're able to withstand the temptation of not violating the Shabbos and doing the right thing and passing on that deal, no matter what. There's a law that a gambler is not qualified to be a witness. Person's a gambler. So there are 2 types of gamblers. The Talmud discusses. There's a gambler. He gambles, but he has a means of income. He has a livelihood. That's one type of person. So meaning that he engages in regular commercial practice every day. On the side, he gambles. Then you have a person who's a professional gambler. His whole livelihood, his whole mind is gambling. A person who gambles, but he engages in normal business practices, on a Torah level, he's qualified to be a witness. But a gambler, we're talking about a professional gambler, that his livelihood is only gambling, on a Torah level, he doesn't qualify. Why? What's the reason? So the Talmud explains it this way. A person who's ein osik b'yishuv shalom, a person doesn't engage to benefit humanity. He doesn't engage with people in the norms of life. With him, his whole mindset is emotional. Everything's a gamble. Odds, what are the odds? You know, is it going to rain tomorrow? It's not going to rain tomorrow. Right? What side of the bed are you getting up tomorrow? Everything is within the context of gambling. This man is not in touch with reality. So when he processes something, he doesn't process in a context of normalcy. So when he sees an event and he has to be a witness, does he see it correctly? He sees it totally off. Give you an example. There was a story many years ago. There was a Jew, he was a Holocaust survivor. His name was Mike Goldberger. And most of his family were murdered by the Nazis. And he came to the United States, and he was real yeshiva bacher, student before the war. Afterwards, it weakened his level of observance. And he married, his wife was also a Holocaust survivor, and they moved to Puerto Rico in the 50s. And he became very wealthy. Eventually moved to New York. Many years ago, he was part of the Yad Avram. He loved to learn, and he came back very strongly, and he spoke Spanish because he lived in Puerto Rico all those years. And he was retired, and he was asked to come to jury duty, and the person who was on trial was a Jewish landlord, an observant man, a Jewish landlord. And the claim against him was that when he did renovations on the building, then the New York City Department of Housing was very strict, that when you disposed of asbestos, you had to meet certain standards of disposal because it's carcinogens, cancer. And somebody had said that he had seen him disposing it in a dumpster illegally and had a 5-year sentence. So this Mike Goldberger, he was on the jury with a bunch of Gentiles. He was the only Jew. And many of them, they only spoke Spanish. And they didn't realize, they saw he was a Jew, spoke with an accent, a European accent. And they didn't realize he understood Spanish. And they said, we're going to fry this Jew. We're going to fry him. We're going to send him away, even though we know he's innocent. There's no evidence, but we're going to send him away. This Mike Goldberger, he was a very tough Jew. He survived the Holocaust, and he was afraid of nothing. As much as the jury tried to convince him to come to their side, he said to me, over his dead body, will he vote with them? And there's no way they're going to convict this Jew where he's innocent. But he's a Jew right away. What do they see? Dishonest man. Jews are dishonest. That's anti-Semitism. I mean, the way they process the Jew's behavior, whatever he does, he's probably doing something underhanded. That's the gambler. Same idea. Whatever he sees, he can't see it in its true light to understand what it is, because he sees everything through that jaundiced eye. Everything is a gamble. That's what it's about. To be able to appreciate the value of spirituality, who God is, what the value of sacrifice is. Because ultimately, that's not what life's all about. It's how much money you have in the bank. but it's to meet the challenge of life. To be able to have the capacity to appreciate that success, you have to have many things to appreciate that. You have to be observant. You have to do mitzvahs. You have to study Torah. You have to understand who God is. It's not enough saying, God, I trust. God, we trust. It's not enough. God bless America. That's not what's going to do it for you. How do you have a capacity? You can have you have a field, virgin soil. Unless you plow that earth and turn it over and cultivate it, nothing grows from that earth. We have to be cultivated. You need that preparation for planting, for sowing. Now, how do you break through all that physicality? How do you somehow penetrate it? It has to be spiritualized. Because a person naturally is a physical being. We're inclined not for spirituality. That's the natural inclination of a human being. We're not. So if we're going in the opposite direction, how do you somehow put the brakes on? You know what you do? You have to have a little bit of a brownout. You weaken the energy of physicality and you put a damper on it. And you change its course. How do you move that rudder where the force is so strong? You have to go into waters where the current is not that strong. So therefore you can move that rudder. Or you become stronger and you have enough strength to move the rudder to go in another direction. That strength is called divine assistance. It's called siyata dishmaya. God assists you when you toe his line. When you toe his line, he throws you the lifeline. And he pulls you out on the brink. That's the way it works. So intellectually, cerebrally, we hear what King Solomon, wisest man who ever lived. Avraham Avinu, founding patriarch of the Jewish people, pillar of kindness. He turned the world upside down, took on the world single-handedly. So evidently it's right. As right as he is, but what do we feel? It's like you say, Rabbi, I understand what you're saying, but there's always the but, and the but always gets in the way. But if you have that understanding, why it's beneficial, there's no but. What a but is minimized. And that's exactly what we're talking about over here. So first you have to know what you're supposed to do. And after you know what you're supposed to do, the question is, why do you have difficulty doing it? You have to figure out why do you have difficulty doing it. And there you have to be advised to be able. It's important to jump over a certain wall, but you don't have enough. Why? Because the other side of the wall is life. But how do I get over the wall? So you tell the person, you know, if you eat healthy and you do exercises, you're able to scale that wall because by jumping, you could actually pole vault yourself over the wall. But physically, you're not strong enough. So you know what's on the other side of the wall. And you have to appreciate what's there to be able to make the investment, to make the change in your life. So cerebrally, we understand. But if you understood it well enough, at all costs, you can do whatever you have to do to get the other side of that wall. And that's what life's all about.